A cat shows up at a funeral, what it does will bring tears to your eyes. The funeral was quiet, almost too quiet. A somber overcast sky hung above the gathered mourners, thick clouds rolling in as if nature itself was grieving. The rustle of the breeze through ancient trees created a haunting melody that played softly against the occasional sniffle or muted sob. Among the mourners, heads bowed in respect, no one noticed the small, sleek figure slipping into the cemetery. It was a cat, a scrawny, unremarkable creature with fur the color of ash and eyes that gleamed like polished amber. At first glance, it seemed like any stray wandering in search of scraps. But as the funeral ceremony proceeded, this feline did something that would leave everyone in shock. Perched silently on a low stone wall, the cat observed the mourners. Its gaze wasn't erratic or aimless. It was purposeful. It focused on one person in particular, a grieving young boy clinging to his father's side, his tear-streaked face buried in the older man's coat. The boy had lost his mother, and the weight of that loss hung around him like a storm cloud, palpable and suffocating. The cat jumped down from its perch, landing softly on the damp earth. It moved closer, weaving its way through the gravestones and approaching the small group with deliberate steps. No one noticed it at first, and those who did gave it little thought, just a stray, probably drawn by the smell of flowers or food. But this was no ordinary visit. The cat's intent became clear when it did something utterly astonishing. It walked straight up to the boy, sat down at his feet, and began to purr, a low, soothing sound that seemed to pierce through the oppressive silence. The boy looked down, startled, and for the first time that day, his tears stopped flowing. The cat's actions from that moment forward would defy explanation and touch the hearts of every person present. By the end of the day, the young boy's sorrow, the mourner's grief, and even the skeptical glances of bystanders would all be transformed by the unlikeliest of heroes, a stray cat with a heart bigger than anyone could have imagined. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a story so profound, so filled with compassion and mystery, that it would change how they viewed the world forever. As the mourners slowly dispersed, their soft footsteps crunching against the gravel paths, the boy remained by the gravesite. His small frame seemed lost in the vastness of the cemetery, the fresh mound of earth before him a stark reminder of what he'd lost. The boy's father, standing nearby, gave him space, knowing words would do little to soothe the gaping wound in his son's heart. The cat, unnoticed by most, didn't leave. It stayed close, watching the boy with an intensity that suggested more than mere curiosity. The wind had picked up, tugging at the flowers laid carefully by the grave, but the cat stood firm, its tail flicking thoughtfully. The boy sniffled, wiping his face with the sleeve of his jacket, and glanced down at the animal. It had moved closer, its amber eyes locking with his. The cat meowed softly, a sound so gentle that it seemed to melt into the rustling leaves. It wasn't the usual cry of a stray begging for food, it was almost comforting. "What do you want?" the boy murmured, his voice hoarse from crying. He crouched down, hesitating before reaching out a trembling hand. The cat didn't shy away. Instead, it leaned into his touch, its purring growing louder, a rhythmic vibration that seemed to echo in the boy's chest. The father noticed the interaction and walked over, his brow furrowed. "A stray," he muttered, eyeing the cat warily. "Don't touch it, buddy. You don't know where it's been." But the boy shook his head. "It's not dirty, Dad. Look. It's nice." The father sighed, glancing at his watch. "Come on. We should go." Reluctantly, the boy stood, and as he did, the cat rose too, following him as he moved toward the cemetery gates. It patted silently, a shadow to his small frame. The boy turned back, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth for the first time that day. "Can it come with us?" he asked, hope flickering in his voice. "No, son," the father replied firmly. "It's a stray. It'll find its way back." But the cat had other plans. As they left the cemetery and headed down the winding road toward home, the feline trailed behind them, keeping a safe distance. Its presence was both mysterious and oddly reassuring, like it was guarding them. Later that night, as the boy lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about the cat. Something about the way it had looked at him, those amber eyes full of understanding, stayed with him. It wasn't just a cat, he felt. It was something more. And outside, beneath the glow of a street lamp, the cat sat in the shadows, its gaze fixed on the boy's window, as if waiting for something. The night was restless. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, signaling an approaching storm. The boy tossed and turned in his bed, his dreams clouded with memories of his mother and the weight of her absence. Suddenly, a sharp sound, like something tapping against the window, pulled him from sleep. Blinking groggily, he sat up and rubbed his eyes. At first, he thought it was just the wind. But then he saw it, those same amber eyes staring at him from the other side of the glass. The cat was back. The boy and his father sat in the living room, the toddler nestled in the warmth of the blanket. Her cries had softened into faint whimpers as she clung to the stuffed animal, her tiny fingers gripping it like a lifeline. The father dialed the police, explaining the situation in hurried but clear sentences. Within minutes, the house was bathed in the flashing red and blue lights of a patrol car. 2 officers stepped inside, their expressions a mix of concern and professionalism. "You found her in the cemetery," one of them asked, crouching to meet the boy's eyes. The boy nodded, glancing nervously at his father. "The cat showed me where she was." The officer raised an eyebrow. "The cat?" The boy hesitated, unsure how to explain. "It led me there. Like it knew she needed help." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner but didn't press further. They turned their attention to the toddler, who flinched at their approach but eventually allowed them to check her over. "She seems okay," the second officer said, his voice gentle. "A little cold and scared, but no injuries. We'll take her to the station and contact child services. Hopefully, we can locate her family." The father nodded, relief evident on his face. "Thank you. Please let us know if there's anything else we can do." As the officers prepared to leave, the boy couldn't help but look out the window again. The cat was there, sitting on the sidewalk, its fur still damp from the rain. One of the officers noticed his gaze and followed it. "Is that the cat you mentioned?" the officer asked. The boy nodded. "Yes. It's been watching us. It's like it knows what's happening." The officer chuckled softly. "Animals can be strange sometimes. But this one sounds like a real hero." The boy smiled faintly. "Yeah, it is." Just as the officers carried the toddler to their car, the cat stood and began to walk away. The boy ran to the door, throwing it open. "Wait," he called out, stepping onto the porch. The cat paused, glancing back at him. For a moment, their eyes met again, and the boy felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice trembling with gratitude. The cat meowed once, soft and melodic, before disappearing into the shadows. The boy stood there for a long moment, the rain now just a faint drizzle, before his father gently pulled him back inside. That night, as the boy lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the cat. It wasn't just an animal, he was sure of it now. It was something more, a guardian, a guide, maybe even a sign. Whatever it was, he knew it had saved that little girl's life. But the cat story wasn't over yet. What came next would leave the boy and everyone else reeling with a mixture of awe, disbelief, and deep respect for the mysterious feline. He climbed out of bed and opened the window just enough to see it properly. "What are you doing here?" he whispered. The cat meowed softly, pawing at the ledge as if beckoning him. The boy hesitated. The storm was closer now, rain had begun to patter against the roof. But there was something in the cat's eyes, a sense of urgency, almost desperation. Against his better judgment, he slipped on his jacket and sneakers, tiptoed past his father's room, and quietly opened the front door. The cat was waiting for him at the edge of the yard. The moment the boy stepped outside, it turned and began walking away, pausing every few steps to make sure he was following. "Where are you taking me?" he asked, his voice trembling. The cat led him through the quiet streets and back toward the cemetery. The boy's heart pounded in his chest as the storm intensified, lightning illuminating the path ahead in brief, blinding flashes. When they reached the cemetery gates, the boy stopped. "Why are we here?" he asked, shivering as the rain soaked through his clothes. But the cat didn't wait. It darted inside, its small frame weaving effortlessly through the gravestones. Reluctantly, the boy followed, his sneakers squelching against the muddy ground. The cat led him to a far corner of the cemetery, a place he hadn't noticed before. And that's when he saw it. A faint, muffled sound, almost like crying, rose above the noise of the storm. The boy froze, his breath catching in his throat. "Hello," he called out, his voice barely audible over the wind. The cat meowed again, louder this time, and pawed at the ground near a cluster of overgrown bushes. The boy stepped closer, pushing the wet branches aside. What he saw made his heart drop. A small, trembling figure, a toddler, no older than 2, was huddled beneath the bush, her tiny hands clutching a sodden stuffed animal. She was pale, her lips quivering as she let out another weak cry. "Oh my God," the boy whispered, dropping to his knees. Hey, it's okay. I'm here." The toddler looked up at him with tear-streaked cheeks, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. The boy shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her, trying to shield her from the rain. "It's gonna be okay," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. The cat stayed close, circling them protectively, its fur slicked down by the rain. It meowed insistently, as if urging the boy to hurry. Cradling the toddler in his arms, the boy stood and began the long, treacherous walk back home. The storm showed no mercy, and his legs ached with the effort, but he didn't stop. The cat stayed by his side the entire way, its unwavering presence giving him the strength to keep going. When they finally reached the house, the boy pounded on the door. His father opened it, his face a mix of shock and confusion. "What? Where were you? And who is this?" he demanded, staring at the shivering child in the boy's arms. "There was a little girl," the boy stammered. "She was alone in the cemetery. The cat, it showed me where to find her." The father's expression softened as he took the toddler from his son's arms and brought her inside. "We need to call the police," he said, wrapping the child in a blanket. The boy turned to look outside. The cat was still there, sitting on the porch and watching them through the rain. It didn't try to come inside, it just sat, its amber eyes gleaming with a quiet satisfaction. "You knew," the boy whispered, his voice filled with awe. "You knew she was there." The cat blinked slowly, as if acknowledging his words, before disappearing into the night. The following day dawned brighter, the storm's fury now a distant memory. The boy woke up early, a nagging feeling pulling at him. He hurried to the front door and stepped outside, scanning the street. The cat was nowhere in sight. "Do you think it's okay, Dad?" the boy asked during breakfast, pushing his cereal around the bowl. His father sighed, setting down his coffee. "Cats are tough, buddy. It'll be fine. It probably went back to wherever it came from."
Tiger blocks road for traveler. So what happens next will leave you in awe. The soft hum of the motorbike was the only sound breaking the stillness of the early evening. Arjun, a modest farmer in his early 30s, navigated the bumpy forest path with practiced ease. His shirt, damp with sweat, clung to his back as he adjusted the burlap sack strapped behind him. The sack contained a week's worth of vegetables he had sold at the village market, barely enough to cover his family's needs. Life had not been kind to Arjun. The fields he toiled on were as unforgiving as the summer heat, and every rupee earned seemed to vanish under the weight of mounting expenses. His wife, Kavita, often worked late into the night stitching clothes for extra income, while their 7-year-old son, Aman, dreamed of a school uniform they could not afford. Yet despite the hardships, Arjun carried a quiet resilience. He found joy in the small things, the smile on Aman's face when he brought home fresh guavas, the cool breeze that brushed against him as he rode home after a long day. The forest was his shortcut back to the village, a path he had taken countless times without incident. But tonight the trees loomed taller, their shadows longer, and an unexplainable heaviness lingered in the air. He gripped the handlebars tighter, brushing off the unease. Little did he know, this ride would change his life forever. As Arjun navigated a sharp turn in the forest path, his headlight illuminated something unexpected. Just a few meters ahead, a massive tiger stood in the middle of the road. Its orange and black coat shimmered under the pale moonlight, and its amber eyes fixed on him with an unyielding gaze. Arjun's heart pounded like a drum. He slammed the brakes, the bike skidding slightly before coming to a halt. For a moment, Neither man nor beast moved. The tiger's presence was commanding, its muscular frame a testament to the raw power of nature. Fear gripped Arjun, but something about the tiger's stance seemed unusual. It wasn't crouched in attack, nor did it growl. Instead, it stood firm, its posture almost deliberate, as though trying to block his path for a reason. Cautiously, Arjun dismounted his bike, his hands trembling. He didn't know why, but he felt compelled to understand what was happening. "Easy now," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the forest. That's when he noticed the source of the tiger's distress, a soft whimper coming from the underbrush nearby. Peering closer, Arjun spotted two tiny cubs, their small forms trembling in the shadows. One of them appeared stuck, its leg caught in a cruel wire trap, likely left by poachers. Arjun's fear gave way to pity. He glanced back at the tiger, who stood watchful yet strangely calm, as if it understood he posed no threat. Swallowing his fear, Arjun made a decision. He reached into his bag and pulled out a sickle, his hands still shaking. Carefully, he edged toward the trapped cub. The tiger growled softly, a warning, but Arjun kept his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm here to help," he murmured, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to reassure. The tiger, the cub, or himself. The wire was tightly wound, cutting into the cub's leg. Arjun worked quickly, his heart racing with every passing second. Finally, with a sharp snap, the trap released its grip. The cub limped free, its tiny cries softening as it stumbled back to its sibling. The tiger let out a low, rumbling growl. Not of anger, but something almost akin to gratitude. Arjun stepped back, his breath uneven as the freed cub nuzzled against its sibling. The tiger's piercing gaze shifted from the cubs to him, its expression unreadable. Was it relief, wariness, gratitude? He didn't know, but one thing was clear. The tiger made no move to attack. Still clutching the sickle, Arjun felt the weight of his decision settling in. "I've just stood face to face with a tiger and lived to tell the tale." But the moment of relief was short-lived. A sudden rustling in the nearby bushes startled him, and his heart leaped into his throat. Before he could react, a new sound echoed through the forest, a sharp mechanical clanking that sent a chill down his spine. Arjun recognized it instantly, the unmistakable sound of a rifle being loaded. His eyes darted toward the source, and there, emerging from the shadows, were two men with weapons slung over their shoulders. Poachers. The men froze when they saw Arjun and the tiger. One of them, a burly figure with a scar running down his cheek, cursed under his breath. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. "What are you doing here?" the other snapped, his eyes darting between Arjun and the tiger. "Get out of the way, or you'll end up just like it." Arjun's stomach churned. He realized their intent immediately. They were here for the tiger. He had heard stories of how poachers hunted these majestic creatures for profit, reducing them to trophies and trinkets. The thought filled him.
"Without this cat, we don't know what would have happened," the toddler's mother said, tears streaming down her face as she gently stroked the cat's fur. "She's not just a cat. She's a miracle." The boy nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He knew the cat was special, but hearing others acknowledge it made him even more determined to share its story. Days turned into weeks, and the kittens grew stronger under the boy's care. One of them, the one the mother cat had placed at the boy's feet, became his constant companion. He named it Amber, after the color of its mother's striking eyes. The cemetery cat, as the town came to call her, became a symbol of compassion and bravery. Visitors to the cemetery often left food and water for her, and she greeted them with the same quiet dignity that had first captured the boy's attention. One day, as the boy sat in the backyard with Amber on his lap, he reflected on everything that had happened. The cat had taught him something he would carry with him for the rest of his life, that love and kindness could come from the most unexpected places, and that even the smallest creatures could make the biggest difference. Looking up at the sky, he whispered, "Thank you, not just to the cat but to the universe for bringing her into his life." The cat, lounging nearby, lifted her head and blinked at him slowly. It was her way of saying, "You're welcome." The story of the cemetery cat reminds us all of the incredible bond between humans and animals. It shows that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can create ripples that change lives. If this story moved you, consider supporting your local animal shelters or adopting a stray in need of a loving home. Share this tale with others to spread the message of compassion and coexistence. And the next time you see a stray animal, take a moment to wonder, what incredible story might they be carrying with them?